members of the Streets and Sidewalks Committee here. Thank you all for coming to this meeting. I guess as far as, Kathy, should we do roll for this or? Okay. 3 items on the agenda.
Eddie, you need to turn on your mic.
Am I that off? No, I've got it on. I'm just not loud enough. We have 3 items on the agenda: 26022, modify current sidewalk program; 26023, modify parking around the square; and 26024, traffic signal timing throughout the city. First off, the 26022, modify current sidewalk program. Right now, I don't know if anyone here has had to fix their sidewalks, but right now that basically the resident is responsible for paying and replacing the sidewalks in front of their house. So we want to try to come up with a program to either reimburse folks for, repairing those, or coming up with a grant system basically that we can get those items taken care of at less of an expense to the homeowner. So Greg, this was originally listed for funding under the 108 account, but it sounds like that's not a place so that any of this money can come from?
Right. The 108 account is limited to streets. I helped draft the language that created the 108 when Jane was the mayor. I thought we should broaden the language and include the words public right-of-way, which is a term of art that would include the sidewalks when this was. She did not want to do that. The thrust at that time was streets and storm sewer and infrastructure. Jane's thought at the time was that across the state of Ohio, the state places responsibility for sidewalks on the adjacent property owner. So she felt the issue was covered. It's established in state law. It's been long-standing. She did not want to muddy the waters, so she left that out. We replace sidewalks when we do streets, but it's folded into the street project itself. If we were to try to make sidewalks specifically themselves coming out of the 108, I think we would need to go back to the city population with another referendum and expand the language.
Okay. Keith, is there, I guess, another, avenue or any of the other council folks that are here, any kind of other alternatives to that than, besides going back to the city for a whole referendum?
Well, otherwise, we have money, the street department is financed through money that comes in from the gas tax and from motor vehicle license tax. But the language that is used there is the same as we used for the 108 fund. So it's formally a Greg question, but I'm pretty sure you're going to come back with the same answer because we literally plagiarized the language for the 108 fund from what the gas tax restriction is. So I imagine that is foreclosed as well, so that you'd basically be at a general fund situation. General fund is pretty much whatever council wants to do as long as it's within the purview of council.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the funding that we'll go forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Chad, or Bill, any other items on that one?
Just that I'd like to understand more dollars and cents wise what it costs for sidewalk replacement. I know Pat had numbers, just generally speaking, but it's a very expensive process.
It is. Removal and replacement of a 4-inch sidewalk is generally $12 to $15 per square foot.
And I know oftentimes that involves forestry department with cutting of roots and things, and possibly
Correct,
get
yeah.
into shade tree replacement depending on issues like that.
Yeah, if there's a root involved, then Jesse and his team come out and assess it. They either elect to shave the root, he can get in more detail, cut it out, and sometimes the recommendation is to remove the tree. So that is extra expense as well.
Well, you had something?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. One is that, yeah, the sidewalk replacement is expensive, but I think what we found out is that the process that we're doing now, which was try to identify certain areas, we tried to cut the city up like a pie and do one pie, notify people, you have to replace this part of your sidewalk, you pay for the sidewalk. That really has taken so long that when you actually walk through every neighborhood in the city, you realize that there's an awful lot of sidewalks that don't live up to their name because they're not really walkable. And so I think the proposal itself is of merit, and it is simply, as Chet said, we need to find out exactly what this would cost, and that would have to be done by a survey of the condition of the sidewalks. And once we knew how many there were, then we could split that up and probably do 50% one year, 50% another year, and understand that if we did that, a pretty big project, that I would presume I'm correct, then the cost would go down because we would contract this out. And then we'd have to consider the liability, because I think Ohio law is that you are responsible for your sidewalk. If somebody trips and falls, you're liable. So we need to work out a mechanism where, once we've identified the sidewalks that need to be fixed, how we're going to split that up to get them all done, and then a way for the city to pay for that, but not do it directly, but through some mechanism, maybe, it's not a great term, but a grant, so that if your sidewalk replacement is $1,500, the city is going to grant that money to you to pay for the sidewalk. I think that we can, with given time, and we have time, I think we can get some expertise and come up with a mechanism that'll make that work.
And I think too, if we were looking at this, we should use some priority basis too. We have areas in the city where there are not sidewalks. We have areas in the cities where they're slanted, right into the street, where they have kind of caved. And so those are very dangerous. So prioritize kind of where we look as well with this study or survey.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, because in all fairness, that's how we ought to do most of the things that we attend to. That's how we should look at them, in a way that's prioritized, because you're right, we have some areas where there are no sidewalks, and where sidewalks, it's pretty dangerous if you're going to walk on a sidewalk, even if the sidewalk is in fairly good shape. So that's great comment. Thanks.
Pat or Nina, what's our normal kind of our street repair schedule for a calendar year? Do we go April through October? What's that typically look like?
For the street repair, not
Yeah.
the sidewalk?
Just imagining, because I figure we're going to kind of have the same kind
Yeah,
of...
we'd like to get the bid process completed sometime in April, which, and sometimes we hit that, sometimes we don't, but and that gives us construction basically from mid-May until October, November.
Is the,
All right.
is the purpose of the grant to stay out of the liability of us paying for it directly?
That's, yeah, I guess that would be kind of the objective, is to try to protect the city on that level.
The reason I
No.
ask,
I mean, no, because I think it's your property where the sidewalk is. If someone trips on your sidewalk, you are responsible. So I think that we'd have to have, Greg could look at it, or the group that did the comprehensive plan, people with some expertise in doing things that we don't typically do, because we'd have to make sure that regardless, we would be paying for it indirectly, but if someone tripped and fell, the homeowner, the property owner is responsible. That's what I was saying. Do you understand that?
the reason I'm asking, I mean, realistically, we're gonna write the check to the contractor, because we get a lot better price that way.
That's right.
And I mean, if we wanna word it as a grant, I mean, we could still, I think, do that, but I think we wanna write the check to the contractors. The contractor's gonna give us a lot better price if they're getting one check from the city that they know they're gonna get, versus chasing down 35 different property owners for a check that's passed through. Just,
I don't know about that, Keith, because if we write the check, then we are the bottom line, whereas if it's a grant and the property owner writes the check, there's a kind of a, keeps in line with the way state law currently handles a liability situation. Because if we're hiring the contractor and we're writing the check, then the quality of the job and the responsibility comes back to us. I think that's what Bill's talking about, trying to avoid, if I'm understanding correctly.
Right, and that's helpful because understand we're in the first 15 minutes of this program, and we have a lot of expertise right here, and we may reach out to get other expertise if we're doing something that's not typically done in the community. But Greg, you're right. That's what we're trying to do, is to keep the liability where it belongs.
If I may jump in also, the question arises that a lot of our sidewalks, the goal is to make it accessible. And, you know, I put this request in because I believe public sidewalks are for the public. A sidewalk is not for just you. It's like a street. Everybody in the community uses a sidewalk. Now, what Mr. Huber said is correct with liability, and I don't want to shift the liability, but when we have trees that disrupt the sidewalk, currently the liability is on the homeowner still, even though it's our tree, and we pay for it. So I don't know if that really changes things, because we're paying for it anyways right now. So that kind of, you know, begets the question of, if we're paying for the fixing the sidewalks because of the trees, aren't we liable for that now? That we be liable? Or, I mean, why would that change liability?
Well, if it's our tree in that particular situation, it's a case-by-case analysis. And if it's our tree that's causing the problem, then we may have responsibility there. It's our tree. So that's part of what Pat's been identifying. And if it is our tree, then we will accept that responsibility. But that's not throughout the city.
Well, I know the other, at least by my house, there's been situations where the storm sewer has failed and the sidewalks fell. The sanitary sewer, which we're not responsible for sanitary sewer, causes the issue. It's usually, they don't become in disrepair, because usually it's the heaving of the sidewalk or the dropping of the sidewalk that causes the problem. And that usually just doesn't happen by happenstance. There's usually an underlying cause of that the substance of the soil is modified by some reason, and it's either done by water lines, sewer lines, or something of that type. So those are the kind of the questions I'm thinking. But I agree we should never change the liability associated with it. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because I guess we would open up a can of worms of taking on the responsibility, but we can take responsibility as a city and say, hey, we can provide an opportunity to help fund it in some fashion to get these sidewalks that are accessible, you know, to everybody. Because you know, there's been so many times when, you know, going out this fall campaigning and stuff, people can't take their strollers. Old people can't walk because they have walkers. You know, there were major changes. The biggest one I saw was about 8 inches. And it was a tree. There was an 8-inch heave of the sidewalk, and of course, nobody's going to walk around. They always walk around in the grass. So there has to be a way to address that, and the funding of it is to allow, and we do get a better grant application. I guess we can take a double look at exactly if we pay the contractor, we're not changing the liability. I wouldn't think. I think this has probably been litigated a lot throughout the state of Ohio, and we could ask, you know, some of the other communities that have been involved in this, how do they address that issue? Because, you know, this is not a first-time issue. This is an issue that's probably prevalent throughout the state, and we can make a good decision. The goal would be, of course, to get those sidewalks fixed to improve the safety of our community and allow the people to use the sidewalks as they were intended.
Can I ask, though, is council at the point where it's 100% city responsibility, or is there some in between, or has anybody thought about that? Because obviously in the past, it's been 100% on the homeowners.
I think what we talked about earlier, when we talked about the need to do this, is, as the President Council was explaining, the original proposal, the one we were working under, was partial. It had to be identified, and initially, tell me if I'm incorrect, we were sending out initially registered letters to homeowners, and then we had to get the response back in so many days. And then if they wanted to do it, they could do it on their own, or if they wanted a better price, we could do it. It wasn't just the complexity of it, it was the time. And then some people just didn't do it. And then we really kind of, the process pretty much slowed down. So I think if we don't do it if we don't recognize that the sidewalks are necessary and they should be safe, and we as a community are going to be responsible for it. I think, I agree with the President of Council, we just go forward and do it, and the complexities of the funding grant, how do we do that and still get the benefit of the contractor doing, paying the contractor, I think all that can be worked out. I think we're a little bit early in the day, but I think our goal is, from what we've heard from Pat, we want to get started so that we can aim for 50% one year and 50% the next year, and actually get this done. So people, when they are out walking, whether you're in a wheelchair, you have a walker, you have no physical issues, but you can trip on a sidewalk if it's just a half an inch high, you trip and fall. And as Councilman Simmons pointed out, we have places in town that you wouldn't want to walk, or you can't walk because there just are no sidewalks.
I agree with all of that. I'm just trying to first figure out the cost. And
Yeah.
whether it's, if we're at a point where we're saying the city's going to for sure cover every.
Well, to answer Mayor Shields' question, my proposal would be that if this state of the urgency in the next couple of years to fix them today, we would pay for the entire cost to fix them now, not forever, but we would make them fix, because once you fix them, they should be good for 10 years at least, right? They should be good for a while. But we're so deferred in that maintenance that we have to do something to be responsible as a government for our citizens to fix those sidewalks. So it would be that the city pay for the cost now to fix them, and then going forward, it's the homeowner has to maintain it after that. There's a window of opportunity to fix them, we get them fixed, and then it goes back, the cost goes back on the homeowner, but we have to make them accessible at this point in time.
Well, Pat, what is the ballpark on fixing 50% of all the sidewalks in the next, say, year?
I just punched up a little graph. We have about 100 miles of roadway, so approximately 200 miles of sidewalk. If 5% of those need to be repaired, and that's just a guess, it might be more than that, but that's like $3 million just to fix 5% of the sidewalks.
I don't think it's that many. I walked a lot of sidewalks. There's areas, it's not 5%. The major problems that we have are in certain areas of the city. We just did a few this past year. We did 2 streets that cost $30,000. That was it.
That was 15,000. We have 2 more streets that we just couldn't get to before winter hit. So first thing in the spring, we'll complete.
So there's 2 streets that was 15,000. That was causing the major problem. So I think 3 million is a little bit high. So I think that we have to look at it. I don't think, it's our responsibility as a government to make sure that our residents are taken care of, right? And if we could do 2 streets for 15,000, we should be able to do the whole community. And my guesstimate, and looking at the whole community after accessing it, just my personal guess would be, it would probably be between 300,000 and 500,000.
Pat, what is the criteria by which you are now deciding this sidewalk's got to be replaced? Is it the 2-inch rule? If it's 2 inch?
Well, it's outlined by ordinance passed by council a few years ago. There's a lot of different criteria, but the most common one is the 2-inch gap, tripping hazard.
So the priority for what we're doing right now is if the incongruity is 2-inch heave, that's a sidewalk that needs replaced.
Correct, per our ordinance.
So
And
how
there's
many of
other-
those are in the city right now?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
Before, I'd like to get back to Mayor Shields' question. Before the committee would decide or council decide, I think I'd like to have a better understanding, Pat's number, John's number, just what is it that we're looking for in terms of total cost involvement, whether it's a 1, 2, 3-year program, just what the total cost is going to be before we decide, yes, the city should take it all on 100%.
I did. One other thing I want to mention, that this 2 inch is the rule, so if a tripping hazard is only 1 3/4, we don't touch it. Is that, everybody understands that? And
I guess, I understand what you're saying, but it depends on the location of the sidewalk, and it depends on the use of that sidewalk. Like, for example, on 42 and by some of the senior homes, it should be a little different, right? I mean, you got seniors using it, and a 2-inch gap, they can't get their walker over it. So I guess I understand what you're saying. In a normal situation that works, but in certain areas of the city, that doesn't work. So I mean, I don't know how you handle that question, because there's traveled areas by the elderly that a 2-inch would be catastrophic for them, right? So I mean, yeah, I guess it's the area too, like sometimes in Ward 3 and in Ward 4, the residential areas, that may not be as big of an issue, but when you get closer to some of the areas that are heavily traveled by people who only can walk or use those little walkers or those little carts that they drive, that'll be a problem.
I agree. I don't argue at all, but I guess we're going to need to be, that's what the ordinance says, so we're going to need some guidance from council as to what we want. We could do whatever you want, but.
No, yeah, I mean, I guess it's never, we always try as a government to put things in a box, and that never really works. But as a guideline, that works in most situations, but not all.
Well, John, the 2-inch rule comes out of a lot of case law that involves the Supreme Court, because I've defended so many of those cases. And the courts kind of look at 2 inches as being the line beyond which a hazard is presumed. Below that, if we start changing that, then we're kind of running up against Supreme Court case law if we're going to declare less than that as hazardous. And so I think we're going to need to talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I mean, you're taking a generalization of everything under 2 inches is going to be fixed, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's certain areas of the city that lends itself that it would probably have to be done. And I don't think if you fix something on a case-by-case basis that is detrimental to the users of that area on a regular basis, that it would be a precedent-setting event. So I know what you're saying, and I agree, but there is flexibility, as you know, Greg, in the law that allows you to do certain things in different areas that doesn't help, set a precedent in every situation.
I don't know if we can just go by area and say this area is, we can lower that threshold. I mean, maybe on a priority basis where we say, where we have those 2-inch, gaps or elevation changes, those are, a priority one for this program. But anything below then, we probably just need more discussion on, what the city actually, helps with either the grant or a financing or whatever the operation would be.
Yeah, it's good. And Mayor, I think one thing we need to do when we go forward, I think the first thing we need to do once we come to some kind of an agreement is to decide how's the survey, how do we survey this area? Yep. To John's point, let's say we take an area that we know is critical and we start that survey there, and then we can probably get a better handle on the idea, Pat, of what numbers are we looking at, how much do we have to do. Counter to that, though, I disagree somewhat with the 2-inch part, because if we're going to fix something and make it right, I mean, if you're a contractor and you're putting in a new building, you put in new sidewalks and they look right. You don't think, well, maybe we can fix this one, but not this one. To me, there's like a right or a wrong, because people fall or trip or it's a hazard if it's a small problem. So I think it's important that now once we hear from anybody that wants to talk in the audience, I think we take in what we've heard, both from the administration and from each other, and try to put the pieces together in a little better form and before we meet again on this issue.
Yeah.
I was going to say, can I ask Pat too? Pat, was it in the past you had an intern that went out and kind of did a survey for you? I'm just trying to figure out in the past, how did we
We have used interns for that. We've also used internal staff when we can. Maybe to touch at Mr. Lamb's point, the way it's set up now, it's very cumbersome to do. You have to go out and survey, locate where these sidewalks need to be repaired. You'll have the location. You got to go to tax maps and determine who the property owner is, mail them a letter and tell them what the situation is, as he said. Then you give them a certain number of days where they can fix it. After that deadline is passed, you have to go back and resurvey and see who did it. They're supposed to call and get a permit when they do it. They don't always. After that point, then you send them a notice, say, we're going to fix it, and this is what your cost is going to be. At that point, you can do the work. So it's a lot of...
But if we took on the work, we could avoid a lot of those steps. I'm just trying to figure out, how do we go out and get a good survey so we have an idea, so we can come up with a cost?
There's certainly consultants that would love to do this for us.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure we consider that as an option too, because I feel like Pat's department is not going to be able to do half of the city and then the other half of the city. So just keep that in mind as we figure things out here. But
Well, yeah, Natalie just mentioned, you know, you always can send an email out or on the website to say, hey, anybody in the community, and try to get the information out, email us your problem, then we can go check that problem out. You know, you make it a smattering of it, maybe 20, 30% of the people respond to, oh, I got a problem with my sidewalk, and then you can check it out. At least that's somewhere to get to the people who are most attuned to and want to have addressed the issue. And then you're right, they use a consultant or internally figure the rest out, but you got to start somewhere to get the information, and the public is probably the best spot to start because they know best their own sidewalk.
All right. Any other questions?
no, and just one other comment. We've got to talk about long-term, when we plant the trees and the roots are going to continue to grow. So we're going to replace some of these, and we're going to have.
We're going to be back at it, yeah.
And that's why Jesse was here today. Jansen's off this week, but we probably have to, in the big scope of things, kind of talk about some of these trees too. We've slowly tried to change, Jesse can speak to it better, where we've tried to figure out the root systems and things to avoid. But we want to not forget about that, because I'd hate to replace everything and then in 2 or 3 years, we've got a root issue again, same spot. So probably need to make sure we add that into the conversation as well.
Right.
And Jesse's here. He came today in case we had any questions about that. I wasn't sure how far we would get with the discussion today, but.
Yeah. Audience, any questions? Or Denny?
Thank you. The two things I would think to be the priority is one, the survey to actually do it. I don't think Pat has enough room on his plate right now to, and maybe you do. I'm guessing in the past, we've always had interns that did the majority of it. So to find out where the priorities are, and then the estimated cost before we go any further. I know we can probably figure out where the money could come from, but I think that would be, for me, it would be really important to find out, one, who's going to collect this data. If like Pat said, maybe we need to hire a consultant to do it, and two, the approximate cost, and then we can go from there. Thank you.
Councilman Simpson, two things. I've talked to the consultants that we had when we did the comprehensive plan, and about a number of issues that, I think that we have ongoing issues, and I think you're absolutely right. The next thing we do, I think, is we need to look into the cost of that and the time that would take to make sure that we have an absolutely, a practical and accurate accounting of what exists, both for the repair costs and how much of the city we can get done is important. And the other thing I am remembering is when we passed the original sidewalk ordinance, I remember your opposition to it in discussions we had, and it was because some people's sidewalks, if you lived on a corner, it's one thing if you live and you just have a sidewalk in front of your house, the cost to replace, but you mentioned a number of times the prohibitive cost for anybody who had the corner sidewalk, how unfair that problem seemed to be. And I think that there's another thing that hopefully, when we get this in place, we can address that issue as well.
Natalie?
Hi, I do have a question. If the sidewalk is disrupted because of tree roots, the sidewalk is fixed, the tree roots are remediated, how long will it take for those tree roots to reestablish and disrupt again?
It depends a lot, depending on how large the tree is, what species the tree is, how close it is to the sidewalk, how large of roots they were that were cut. But then I guess another thing that needs to be considered is, could further preventative maintenance happen to prevent it from happening? But I would say you probably have at least a few good years where roots are not going to cause any problems, and then maybe they could start to cause a problem after 4 or 5 years, slightly. You're probably not going to have many major problems for at least, I would guess, at least 5 or 6 years or more. But obviously, there's always the option of continual maintenance. And just to answer that a little bit more, I'll just mention that one thing that we've done is essentially we bring our stump grinder and we cut a line on the inside of the sidewalk to just try and cut off any of the roots that are going underneath the sidewalk. So that's something that can continue to be done, but there's a lot of trees in the city. And so we've mostly done that on a case-by-case basis. But that is something that can be done to prevent the problem from getting worse.
All right.
I could say, if I could just make, it does sound like we're all in agreement. We want to do something about sidewalks, both administration and council. So I want people to know that we know there's an issue and that we want to take care of it. We just have to figure out the details now.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty early on in this process, but obviously we want to recognize that there's some urgency to it, but we want to make sure we get it right too. So,
thank you.
Second item, I think this is the one that everybody, our guests are probably mostly excited to talk about, is parking around our square. This was an item requested by a council president, looking at a handful of issues. One for improving the safety on the square. Chief of Police provided us some data and information showing that we average about mid 30s to upper 30s in traffic accidents around the square. And then we're also, and I want to bring that up first because the North Star for any of these discussions is, safety for our residents and our public too. So, but then, along with that, we still want to make sure that we do right by, our businesses on the square. So that's sort of how, this kind of came up on our agenda list, and it became obviously, a couple of, notifications on social media kind of brought this to attention. So, sort of initially, I guess, we're still, very early on in the process, but I think a couple of the things similar to the sidewalks where we've, got some, homework and some studying to do on the items, from a, either from a, from either working on, what a plan could look like as far as how we arrange the parking or, the signals and lighting itself. But since it was brought to us by our council president, John, do you have any, items or thoughts?
Well, thank you. The original thought of bringing this forward is, as you know, we entered a relationship with Main Street Medina many years ago. We have a gem of an asset in our city, which is called the Square. And we have an historic square, which has great buildings on it. We attract thousands of people a year and each event to our square from all over Northeast Ohio and maybe from other states that come in to visit Castle Noel and things of that nature. With all that occurring, which happened over the last 20 years, we have a lot more pedestrians walking around the square on a regular basis. So the question becomes, what are we trying to do here? We have the same parking mechanisms, we have the same traffic flows, we have all these same things, but we're not changing anything to try to encourage more pedestrian-friendly atmosphere around the square. We want everybody to come, but then we have to realize that causes points of conflict, both from automobiles and the pedestrians. So we have to figure ways of how do we solve that problem. And by looking at the square, my first thought would be, of course, the north side of the square, which has the kind of angled parking that back out into Route 42 Court Street, and on the PJ Marley side, which is sidewalks only like 6 foot wide. I've been to a few events sitting on benches around there, and nobody can walk on those sidewalks because they have to walk in the street because it's not big enough. The goal, at least on the north side, I would look at to try to assist the businesses and to try to make it safer for the pedestrians is, eliminate that angled parking, allow the businesses to have some outdoor eating areas, because that's more of the restaurants are on that side, and that would allow a little bit more pedestrian friendly, allow the businesses to open up a little bit more, allow the people who visit the square to eat on the square and look at the square. So it would provide a benefit to the local businesses around the square, because that's kind of what we want to do. We have like 100% occupancy around the square. We want to keep it that way, right? And we have to find out what the solutions are to that, because you have delivery vehicles, you have handicapped people. How do you solve that problem? And then we also have to look down the road 10 to 15 years to autonomous vehicles. How's that going to change? We have to think of these issues now, because whatever we do to modify the square has to address these issues that are going to occur in the future. I'm a strong believer that in 20 years from now, it's not going to be the same around towns around America anymore because of autonomous vehicles, especially with the cost of vehicles going up so rapidly. People aren't going to be able to afford cars like they used to. So we have to figure out, how do you incorporate that? How do you have drop-off zones for loading and unloading? Is it in the back of the restaurants? For handicapped people, what's more efficient a way to do that? Because on the street's the most dangerous, right? So if you can put them somewhere else where it's safer, that'll be great, and also provide a benefit to the business at the same time. That's kind of the vision of what would happen around the square. Now, I'm not saying eliminate all the parking around the whole square. As you mentioned, Mr. Isabella, we have about 1,200 parking spaces in the 9-block area that are available for people to use the square, and we have 2 parking decks that have about 600 parking spaces on it. So we have ample parking. And a lot of people on social media say, oh, that's too far to walk. It's like 75 yards. So the question is, maybe we got to train ourselves to say, we have a great community and a great square. We want to keep it that way and make it more pedestrian friendly. Change is difficult, right? Change is always difficult when you're used to things that were always the way they were, but things can be better. And I think that's what I would like the committee to look at, is how do we make this better for our community, and how do we highlight the square as a place that people want to visit?
One of the things that, and I do think the city has a lot more parking than people realize, but I do want to recognize that, we still have, I still would like to, look into ways where we can at least, maintain the ADA spots, or even, potentially add additional ADA parking if we're going to, have that sort of potential trade-off. I take it, Greg, is there is there a legal requirement around the square? Is there a certain percentage of spots that, on that those public access roadways that, have to be dedicated to ADA spots, or?
I'm not aware of that. I don't think so, but I guess I'd have to check that. I think it's just been created through businesses opening and council trying to provide what's available, so it is grown to be what it is organically.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One of the things that Council President Coyne mentioned, that was mentioned to me by business owners, loading and unloading zones, how much that cramps both the east-west sides, north and south, blocks traffic, makes it very difficult to navigate. So I'd like that to be part of this discussion.
Certainly. I know that we have some of our local, business owners here. Main Street Medina is represented. Is there any, comments or suggestions that anyone from the audience would like to provide, or questions? They have to go back to the microphone? Okay.
I hate the microphone back there.
I'm George Sam with Main Street Medina. Yeah, we are definitely wanting to partner with you on this. We've had discussions before with some of the staff members and some of the council folks about what is the right solution for us. Some of the feedback that we're hearing and getting is it's a great, one solution may work well, but there's other things that have to happen at the same time. So we're willing to kind of work with you on a study, on some research. I know Manfred in our office has already done some parking research. A couple things that come up is maybe signage for those out of town, where you can easily see where our parking lot is. There's an app, I just showed Kimberly, there's an app where you can actually find available parking spaces. So kind of helping create an environment where we can eliminate some spaces, make it a little safe, but also, help out that perception that people have about parking issues. So moving forward, would definitely like to be partners with you on working on a workable plan.
And
I would like to go back to the previous thing. There wasn't a public comment from the last item that was on there. I did want to mention about the modification of sidewalks too. If you look at the residential neighborhoods, you got one issue. If you look at the commercial district, it's another issue with width of sidewalks and things like that. If you notice, if you walk down towards Southtown on South Court Street, the sidewalks go from like 8 to 10 feet to about 3 feet wide. So if you're going to modify sidewalks, let's also talk about widening them in the commercial districts as well. And again, we'd like to be part of that conversation and help do some background study on that.
Thank you, George.
If you widen something.
And Ed, just to follow up on what we're talking about parking, to be clear too, and we were discussing at the same time as Mayor Schuh mentioned the DORA, right? We're going to talk, this all kind of goes in with everything because, in order to have a DORA, you got to have a safe place, right? So I think all these things kind of work together in order to have a successful downtown. You just can't throw things at the wall, so to speak, and see if they stick. You have to think about how that's going to impact everybody and if it makes sense to happen. So I think this discussion not only includes the parking, but it also includes the DORA because of the safety issue.
You got another person.
I was going to say, and I'll tag on to that Mr. Coyne was talking about. We also want to talk about just, are there better ways of traffic flow? There's a lot that goes into this as well. And we started some initial conversations. We didn't want to get too far till we had this meeting today.
Right.
To see what direction we want to go in. But there's some experts out there. There's some grants, things working with ODOT, OACA, just different things that we need to probably look at the same time. And then one of the biggest issues I don't want to ignore is we also have distracted drivers. That's the other big difference that has happened over the last 20 years here, where people don't pay attention, and we've got to do something to get people to also be paying attention in that square area for all the pedestrians.
Well, and I think he's right because, the chief, Chief Kinney gave us a diagram of the last 5 years of the accidents that occurred around the square, just around the square roads. And last year there was 41 accidents, property damage related, 1 fatality. And so those are the issues we have to address. And you're correct. I don't know how you get people to pay attention, right? That's the big issue. But maybe if you eliminate some of the distractions from their view, that'll make it less likely that they be distracted in the car. So I don't, maybe that's it. I don't know. I know we're doing some things with the bump outs that we've already talked about. And I don't know about the timing of the bump outs, because if we're going to do some modifications of the parking, I think we'd only want to disrupt the square one time. We wouldn't want to do the bump outs and then come back and say, oh, we're going to close you down again and we're going to make modifications. So I'm not sure, Patrick, when is that supposed to occur?
Well, as you might remember, we've bid that project twice now. First time, I think, was in August, and I think 5 or 6 contractors picked up the bid package, and no one submitted a bid. So obviously, we couldn't award it. We bid it again in December. After some modification, we went back to council and got some more money authorized. Our amount authorized was about 2.1 million. We received 1 bid for 3.2 million, a little bit over our bid estimate. So we elected not to award it and to give it a third try. Talking with ODOT, we're kind of coming up to the idea that this is probably, it started as just a resurfacing project of 42 from up near Waite's Funeral Home, north of Homestead, down to Lafayette, and then all 4 sides of the square. That's the base, so we're going to probably look at bidding it as the base bid, and this bump out would be an ad alternate. That's advantageous because if we get a good number on the base bid and a poor number, as we kind of expect on the bump outs, because those are proven to be very expensive, we don't have to award the bump outs. But to answer your question, we're looking at bidding again in March or April, because we'd like to hit this construction season for the resurfacing at all.
Well, correct, and I think the question would be if we can do the bid at alternate, maybe we don't have to do all 4 sides of the square. I know that would be ideal, but let's do the high incident areas. Specifically, Court Street, as you mentioned, resurfacing it, that's the one that causes us, that's the most highly traveled street that we have going north to south. So, maybe that could be part of it instead of trying to do all 4 at once. Maybe that's just impossible at this time.
Pat, just real quick, just for the sake of the audience, when we're referring to bump outs, what do we mean by that?
ODOT approached us, actually. We had a traffic fatality in 2024. A pedestrian was hit, and they approached us and offered grant money if we would agree to add on to this resurfacing project with the bump outs. And bump outs, pretty simply, are at the intersections, all 4 corners of the intersections, expanding the pedestrian hold area, widening the sidewalk at the intersection. And they have done this in the past, and according to their experiences, it's a much safer solution. So that's what the bump outs are. Our challenge is, 4 sides of it's 4 state routes, a lot of traffic, and try and do any kind of construction while maintaining traffic is very difficult, and this is what contractors are telling us. It's just a nightmare to do it, and that's why the numbers are coming up so high.
Did you have some, ma'am? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, if there's any other public comments that anyone would like to give,
Yeah.
you'll have to go up to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Lisa Campbell. I've lived in Medina most of my life. I am about 3 streets away from the square and have, over the decades, watched as the Community Design Committee and all the people in Medina have tried to make the square what it is today. We are reaping the benefits of a lot of people's work in making the square look as gorgeous as it does. And to go back to what you said, John, movies being filmed here, events with thousands of people coming. I think it's time for us to take the next step and make this square more manageable. Like you mentioned, it's very repetitive what I'm saying. The square hasn't changed. If you've seen pictures of the 1800s and the early 20s, it looks exactly the same. I know this is just the beginning, but thoughts that I have are to have some kind of committee with community members, Main Street Medina, and looking at the possible options, which might be the parallel parking that we have toward the fountain being on the other side of the square. The only other thing I wanted to throw in here, in addition to the massive safety issue that I see going through the square every day, is, and I don't think people drive that quickly. I find that people are trying to be careful, but I think with the pickup trucks and the minivans and everybody parked the way they are, as a driver, when you come through, you're looking for pedestrians. You're looking for cars. You're looking to make sure that somebody's not backing into you from Court Street. So looking at the different options would be very important, but also the aesthetics of it. When you go through the square and you're at an event and everybody is parked diagonally the way they are, it just doesn't look cute. It doesn't look nice. And I think it's time to make some kind of change. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly.
Hello, I'm Bethany Dentler. I am a City of Medina resident. I love the square. I work at the square. I'm also the Medina County Economic Development Director for the county. So I have, I guess, a great interest in the economic success of the square as well, and the businesses that have invested so much to be there. So my feedback is in a couple of different areas. Number one, I think that maybe before we go ahead with a major road resurfacing project, we really need to take a step back and do a little bit more studying. I think that, I serve on the city's Economic Development Committee. Main Street is part of that. There's a group that's already there that has been looking at these issues from an economic development perspective. We can invite residents or whoever else needs to be added to the conversation, but I think it's worthwhile looking at some other options before final decisions are made about closing up traffic and reconstructing and then having to spend money all over again. And I couldn't agree more with the previous speaker. I agree that those diagonal stripes are just terrible. I avoid them whenever I can. It's very dangerous to try to back out into traffic. I also think that something should be looked at with regards to the mid-block sections where you can walk through. I almost hit someone this past fall. I was going very slowly and still almost hit him because it's very, when the sun's coming in your eyes, it's just hard to see. So I think there's some major safety issues that need to be looked at. And I think the expansion of the sidewalks is a wonderful consideration. We have amazing stores, restaurants here, and I think they could greatly benefit, and I think it would greatly add to the aesthetic of the entire square. So,
All right, thank you.
I wanted to say one thing while we're talking about this topic also. This came up when Main Street presented the discussion about the DORA last time. I've tried several cases now involving truck, car, pedestrian accidents, and we've handled 2 death cases in the last 2 years up on the square. And in 2 of the trials I've had, the defense attorney for the trucking company did a good job of presenting to the trial court how blind a truck driver is to pedestrians. We literally, by ordinance, route our trucks from our industrial sector through our downtown. And in keeping with what the gentleman who was a truck driver at the last meeting was talking about, you can't see. You have, in these trucks, really serious blind spots, especially involving pedestrians coming from the side. And so when we're talking about bump outs and whatnot, I wonder if it's possible to do anything about our truck traffic, the way it's routed, because I'm telling you, no matter what you do, these vehicles are very blind to pedestrians.
Thank you.
I'm John Whitnauer, resident Medina. I was the one that here talked about trucking last week and the difficulties of getting trucks through here and getting out of here because, you know, everything that we bring is something necessary to daily life. And now we've got Meyer and we've got all those other things, and it is just so tight on the square, like you said, there needs to be some sort of routing for trucks. I know I hear all the time on that neighborhood thing, the women and others that say on there about the trucks clogging up the square, but part of the problem with trucks blocking the square is people not noticing the white spots where they have to stop. Many of those are too short, but at least if they're obeyed, it'll move trucks through there a lot. I mean, you know the problems down at the Marathon turning on 42, the problems at Busy Bee where there's all sorts of issues. People coming east to go south on Court Street right there. So there's just a lot of issues doing with trucks. And I also made the mention about the diagonal parking. If you come down through there with a four-door pickup truck and a long bed on right there, you're going to go into that middle lane where that traffic is over there. So my suggestion on the north side right there is to go with all parallel parking. Maybe make that a whole side handicap parking. Maybe choose the courthouse side and the north side is just designated parking because most of those things they open up on the right side so that if people are pulling up against the curb, they could get out easy and out there through there. But the angled parking is a big issue. I mean, even with going through there with a car. I could go on and on about the trucking issues around this town, but it all comes down to people just do not follow the law when it comes to where you have to stop, the red light running and all that stuff, and it's run rampant in this town. I've been here 20 years now. It is rampant. With the people in the driving and stuff. I tend to lose focus sometimes, and my wife keeps saying, you probably got early Alzheimer's, which I probably do, but I wanted to get into before I couldn't say anything and make it heard. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, John. Bill, do you have any other comments? Oh, one more? Sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Megan Harbath, 225 East Liberty Street. My family owns several of the buildings on the north side of the square. We have continuous problems with parking and trucks, and I get that the aesthetics are very important, but to me, we have a functionality problem and a safety problem, and that should be number one. And if we can solve those, then we work on the aesthetics of it. I have equal concerns for safety on the north side of the buildings on the square. We have semis pulling in there from all directions on streets they're not even allowed to be on, or through narrow passageways. We have a new toy store there, and we have a coffee shop that caters to families with children. And I'm really worried that someone will get hit or hurt back there, and we have all the weight of the semis that are just constantly destroying the property back there. So I love the idea of the on-street dining. That sounds amazing. But we also need to figure out how to get services, food, and garbage removal from all of the properties on the square. And it needs to be looked at as a package, not just one thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I just say it from my seat? Or do I need to go to the microphone?
If you want to be recorded, you'll have to go up.
It was just a quick thing about delivery of water. Sorry. A lot of places I go to restrict deliveries, maybe 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Or, you know, stuff like that. You could do something like that to, because yeah, I'll be doing those trucks around the square, try to deliver stuff. It screws everything all up. But yeah, they can come up with something with earlier in the morning. It's because those guys are up early. They're all the time early, and it would be easier for them.
And Ed, just one last thing.
No.
Your number 3 that we're not going to get to is kind of wrapped into this.
Yeah.
Because the signalization has to work with the square, so that kind of goes with it.
All right.
Is it okay to go?
Yeah, I'll have, just do the, we've got our finance committee meeting at 6, but you have time for yours. So, please.
Okay. My name's Betsy Jenny. I'm a resident of Medina for 36 years and a shop owner for 18 on the square. And I see everything every day between people on their phones driving through the square, parking not right, the extended bed trucks are very hard to see past. My biggest concern too right now is the hotel that's going in. What is that going to do to South Court Street and the pedestrians, and how are they going to get across the street safely without crosswalk in the middle of that block? I mean, people jaywalk across there all day long, every day. And I think that needs to be addressed as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. One thing I think it's important to understand is that something that we're not going to do. And what we're not going to do is punt this down the road or decide that each of these things has been talked about week, month, year, decade ago, that these are important issues and they actually need to be attended to. And fortunately, the issue was brought up, it was turned in, and top on the list, the priority will be safety, safety, and safety. It's not cost. As much as I'm committed to the aesthetics of the downtown, it will not be about the aesthetic. The downtown only worked as a restoration because it was not a museum. It has to be functional. People have to be able to make business. In business, need to make money. So we need to take into consideration all of those things in this process. How people will get deliveries, how many people can park. If you're a business that's walk-in, a donut shop, a coffee shop, that one parking place might really matter. If you're a store, people are going to stay longer. So all those things we need to look at. Cleveland Heights took away all took away all the parallel parking on the side of the street. They left a place for deliveries and a place for handicapped. When Mark Colasar and I came up with the idea for the flashing lights on the square, that idea came from Cleveland Heights. However, the way they were put in was not correct because there was never supposed to be parking right up against where they are. The parking on the interior part of the square never should have been there because you can't see the people coming out from the car. And I've spoken to the folks that did the comprehensive plan about most of these issues that we're trying to deal with, and you're absolutely right. It needs to be all hooked together as a package to ensure that it's safe, to ensure it accommodates parking, traffic flow is attended to, the maneuverability of trucks. All those things need to be factored into it to make sure that once we get done, we have accomplished something that was going to attribute to make the square a better place to come and visit and make it safer. But the number one thing is safety, and we are absolutely going to go forward with this as a council and make sure that we get this done, working with the administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I guess, yeah, we're butting up with our finance committee, so I'll bring this committee meeting to a close. If anyone still feels that they have a point or a thought that they'd like to provide, we'll still have the public comment portion of our standard city hall meetings, city council meetings, at 7:30. If you want to stay, more than welcome to. I'd recommend grabbing a bite to eat instead, but just want to say thanks for everyone for coming and, appreciate everybody's input.